On WNIN Lawmakers this week, our guest is Indiana State Representative Cindy Ledbetter. We'll also get updates from the Indiana General Assembly and from Governor Holcomb. That's coming up next on WNIN Lawmakers. Welcome to the program. I'm John Gibson, Morning Edition host for WNIN FM. Before we speak with Indiana Representative Cindy Ledbetter, Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on the week at the State House.
Republican State Representative Holly Sullivan was sworn in as Indiana's new Secretary of State after the governor appointed her to replace retiring Secretary Connie Lawson. Sullivan, who served in the General Assembly since 2014, wouldn't say whether she plans to run in next year's statewide election to keep her new position. The Senate unanimously approved a police reform bill supported by groups including the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus, the NAACP, the Indiana Black Expo, state public defenders and prosecutors, and every major law enforcement organization in the state. The measure includes new training requirements and a ban on chokeholds unless deadly force is warranted. It also makes it easier for police who commit misconduct to be removed from the force. And legislation addressing the governor's emergency powers, which were used extensively throughout the pandemic, now primarily just allows legislators to call themselves into special session during a statewide public emergency. There are questions, though, whether that violates the Indiana Constitution. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
This week, local state representative Holly Sullivan was tapped to replace Secretary of State Connie Lawson.
The top priority for me is to safeguard Indiana's record of free, fair, and secure elections, ensuring that all Hoosiers know that their vote counts. We will continue this ongoing effort of defending our elections, but I'm also very excited to take on and tackle the roles and other responsibilities of this office by ensuring that we protect Hoosiers from financial scams. I come into this job with 8 years of experience in the legislature, many different leadership roles within that time there, as well as serving on Elections Committee and partnering with the Secretary of State's office for the last 4 to 5 years on carrying legislation and modernizing Indiana code to work within that office. Working with our governor, working with our legislators and our local partners, and the office's excellent professional staff, I am absolutely excited and honored to serve all Hoosiers now as your Secretary of State.
Governor Holcomb gave his weekly COVID-19 update shortly after Indiana opened up the vaccination eligibility to 45 and older. Here with more is Nolan Barnett.
Indiana's health officials are encouraged by the latest vaccine numbers in the state, with almost 150,000 Hoosiers receiving a shot. This after the state lowered the eligibility to 45 and older.
In just 3 months' time, nearly 2.2 million doses of vaccine have been administered in the state of Indiana. That total represents more than 1.3 million unique individuals, which is an increase of nearly 147,000 from last week and represents nearly 20% of our state's population. Of those individuals, more than 870,000 are fully vaccinated, up from nearly 745,000 last week. This means that 12.7% of our population has received either 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna or a single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Dr. Bach says right now the amount of vaccines Indiana is receiving is less than other states, but that more will soon be available.
Indiana appears to be receiving thousands of doses per 100,000 residents, less than some other states, according to information that we monitor on the CDC website. According to our reports from the federal government, we will begin to see a greater supply of the 3 vaccines the last week of March.
And as far as advisory levels go, that is also trending positive.
Our advisory map, which indicates the level of restrictions that counties must follow, shows just 1 county in orange for the 2nd straight week and no counties in red. 55 counties are now at the blue advisory level, up from 42 last week. This means that more than half of the state is currently in the least restrictive advisory level, and that is certainly good news for all Hoosiers.
Officials did note a slower uptick from Hoosiers in their 40s and 50s. Dr. Lindsay Weaver explains why that's a problem.
Our data continue to show that people in their 40s are 3 times at greater risk of hospitalization and severe illness and 10 times at greater risk of death from COVID-19. So please, do not take this disease lightly. Get the vaccine so that you can protect yourself and the people that you love.
If you're still looking to sign up for the vaccine, you can visit coronavirus.in.gov/vaccine or by calling 211. For WNIN, I'm Nolan Barnett.
Representative Ledbetter, thank you for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. You're coming to us via Skype, and we certainly appreciate that. Well, you were a newcomer to the Indiana General Assembly. You were just elected in the November election. You were elected during the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. We're asking everyone this question right off the top. But what do you think of Indiana's response to the pandemic? Do you feel we're on a good path at this point?
Yes, I think we did a really good job. Our governor, I think he did well, especially with the vaccine rollout and, limiting capacity and people having to wear masks and following guidelines to keep the hospitals from becoming overcrowded was very important.
So you feel that we're on a good path? Where are we at where we need to be at this point, I guess would be the question?
Yes, I think so. I'm hoping we can land the plane pretty soon and maybe free things up a little bit in the near future. But yes, I think we've done a good job. So
yeah, the vaccine rollout is underway, as you mentioned. How is it going? How is the rollout going in your district? I know you're from Warwick County. You represent a few counties in that area. How is it going in your district?
Well, it's going well. We did it by age as a state, and I think that was very important because the people that are most susceptible to COVID-19 are over 60 years old, and then each year above that, you become more and more susceptible to have problems with being hospitalization or even dying. Mm-hmm. And I think, once again, we did a really good job in bringing that to all of our counties and getting it out to the people who needed and wanted it.
Yes, and of course, this past week, Indiana lowered that age to 45, allowing for more than 400,000 people, as I understand it, to get the vaccination. What do you have to say to anyone who might be concerned about getting the vaccination? Are you encouraging folks to get the shot?
I think that's a personal choice. I think that it's a personal choice. Right now, that vaccine has been emergency authorized by the FDA. It's not been fully approved. And so I think that because of that, there may be some hesitancy. And so I think it's just going to take time. I know that as the younger population, as we're moving down in age for the vaccine, they seem to be a little more hesitant than what the older population has been. Mm-hmm.
So if I may ask, have you gotten the vaccination yourself, or do you plan to?
Well, I actually got COVID, and I have only recovered for about 4 weeks. And so I will probably move forward with the vaccine once I'm sure that I'm in a full recovery and it's going to be safe for me, yes.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you've recovered. Can you give us a little bit of an idea about your case and what you had to deal with during the COVID?
Well, I'm just thankful to be alive. I just had a bit of a fever and some muscle pains. And then the following week, I was very tired, and then still a little bit tired, but there was one point where I had to take almost a 2-hour nap every day. I'm back to the gym now and feeling better. So it's been about 3 weeks. I did lose my ability to smell, but that is almost back.
Yeah. All right. Well, obviously you have a story to share with folks out there who are concerned about it. Well, let's move on to some of the legislation that you're dealing with up there in Indianapolis. House Bill 1123 passed the House. It allows legislative leaders to call back lawmakers in the event of an emergency like the COVID-19 pandemic. You voted in favor of the bill, as I understand it. It reins in the governor's authority somewhat. Can you explain why you support that measure?
I think the most important thing to me in that bill was the ability to worship, because that's from a federal constitutional standard. And we have a lot of people that weren't able to go to church. So I am in support of that more than anything. The part that allows the legislators to call back a special session, that would be determined at that time that an emergency order was issued. So I think it would be on an individual basis, and hopefully we wouldn't have to go through anything like this again, but you never know.
So you see some flexibility there. I mean, it's not like you necessarily have to go back every 30 days. Is that the way you see it?
Right, we're trying to keep it flexible. It's a lot to get 150 people back to a state capitol and get them to all agree on something. We need some flexibility there.
Right. All right, well, let's move on to the budget bill. It is a budget year, and that, of course, is the overriding issue in the General Assembly. As you see it, how is the state budget looking so far?
I'm really proud of our budget. We're maintaining that AAA credit rating. We've got a savings balance back in place. We are supporting small business. We're supporting broadband again. We've been able to increase public education dollars. Once again, I'm so proud of our state. We're also supporting law enforcement in that budget, which I think is important.
Yeah, well, what are some of the priorities in there as you see it? You mentioned law enforcement. What else do you feel is important in this new budget?
Well, the broadband, I think, is the most important thing in the new budget, and that's based on my constituency. We have a lot of rural areas, and pandemic year like this, we saw the need and the importance of broadband and getting that expanded and getting it out to all of our residents.
Right. Well, let's move on to a Senate bill that was handed to the governor this past week. It gives schools who have been operating virtually full funding for this year. That sort of gets back to that whole virtual and broadband situation. How important do you think it was for the schools to receive that support?
Oh, I think that was very important. I know that that was that House Bill 1003 that did that established the definition of virtual instruction. And then we also, House Bill 1008 provides $150 million for summer education for students who may have fallen behind because of virtual instruction.
Right.
And then also the budget is increasing public education as well.
Well, speaking of education, I know a lot of local school districts, you're probably aware of this, have expressed concern over House Bill 1005. It increases funding for school vouchers. You voted for the measure. What do you say to those school districts and others who are concerned that it would harm public schools in Indiana?
Well, to me, the most important part about House Bill 1005 is that it provides an opportunity for children who have mental health needs, children who are in the foster system, children who are of military families, and those who may need special education. They might not fit best with the public school model. That is why I voted in favor of the bill, because my background is in psychiatry and I see children with special needs, and I think it's important that sometimes they need specialized services. Mm-hmm.
Well, also though, I guess, do you think it's okay essentially to spend public money on private schools?
Well, they're not all private schools. My constituents on this matter, I got more email and phone calls in favor of House Bill 1005 than I did against House Bill 1005, and I'm here to represent my constituents. And I don't have, in my district, we have really high quality schools and high quality education. We don't have very many children who are not in our public schools who are using those vouchers. I think this is better for the state as a whole for some of those areas that may not have as good an education or system as what I have in House District 75.
About, you say you got a response from your constituents about, let's say 2-1, 3-2. How strong was the support that you picked up on?
I think it was probably 3-1 in favor of House Bill 1005.
I see. All right, well, on to another mental health bill. You mentioned your career. House Bill 1118 touches on health care programs and safety plans dealing with mental health. It passed the House unanimously last month and is in committee in the Senate. Essentially, what will that measure do? Obviously, you supported it.
Right. That will allow EMS services to communicate with adult protective services to help people get services that they may need. It's really going to help save money as it relates to the 911 calls, because sometimes those people will call over and over and over again. And if we get them linked and set up with the right people and the right services, they're going to have a better outcome, and we're going to save money locally.
Right. I understand in this same area you co-authored House Bill 1203, which deals with various departments of health matters. It passed overwhelmingly in the House. Can you tell us more about that bill? What's included in it?
That bill was just to clarify language as it relates to the state departments. It was more of a technical bill.
I see. So no major impact on any of those other bills you're talking about. Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about House Concurrent Resolution 9. It states a concurrent resolution directing the Congress of the United States to propose to the several states an amendment to the United States Constitution concerning the membership of the United States Supreme Court. That's kind of brief and maybe a little hard to understand. Do you understand the purpose of that resolution?
I think that may be related to, there's concern, I think, that the new government and federal government in place may try to add a few more Supreme Court justices, and that's probably trying to limit that. I would assume. I'm not sure that I'm correct, though.
I see. So there's a concern there about, and it's been talked about, obviously, about possibly adding members to the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, we should reset for our listeners. This is Lawmakers on WNIN FM. Our guest this week is State Representative Cindy Ledbetter of Warwick County. Let's move on to another House bill that has received quite a bit of attention. It's 1369, and it eliminates the requirement to have a license to carry a handgun in the state of Indiana. The bill is now in committee in the Senate, as I understand it. What are your thoughts on that bill? And I understand you were excused from the vote. Is that right?
I was excused from the vote because I had COVID, yes. And boy, did I take you from the Second Amendment groups. We were like, where was she at?
Right. So you weren't there for the vote, but what are your thoughts on that bill?
Oh, I support that legislation. I think that it's important that law-abiding citizens are able to carry a handgun. I know that we are working to get a database together of people that have had criminal backgrounds, so that when a police officer pulls somebody over, they can see that record. Right now, if they pull somebody over, they can see whether or not you have a license to carry. But I think it's more important whether or not they can see if you have a criminal background when they pull you over. And trying to get those things adjusted, I think, are important to make it more beneficial for our law enforcement.
Now, of course, you have to have a license to drive a car. Why do you think you shouldn't have to have a license to carry a deadly weapon?
Well, I think that it's not about carrying the deadly weapon as much as about protecting yourself. I kind of got me on that one. When I working in mental health, I guess we have the background check still in place,
right.
And you can't purchase a firearm without that background check. And if I have somebody that has a mental health issue in my office that sees me and they want to carry a handgun, I do make them go to training for a handgun. But I don't think that they should have a license to carry that handgun, because that license doesn't require that you have training. That license is just a payment that you make to the state. It doesn't require any type of training. A driver's license, you have to go through a training program to get that license. You don't have to do that to have a concealed carry permit.
But if you don't have as you were saying earlier, though, I mean, if someone has a permit, it's on record, though, so folks know essentially who has a permit to carry guns and who doesn't, correct?
Right, but the good guys are the ones that have the permits to carry the guns. Bad guys don't have permits to carry guns. They don't follow the law. It's better to have a database of somebody who's had a criminal record than a database of the law-abiding citizen.
All right, well, let's move on. We have a few more minutes here. Speaking of law enforcement, House Bill 1006, it establishes some mandatory de-escalation training for police officers. You, along with 95 other members, voted in favor of the bill, and it is headed to the governor's desk now. That law enforcement reform bill, what were some of the things in it that you think are important? You voted for it, right?
Yeah, I think that's important that it's going to open up records for police officers so that we don't have one officer leaving a police or a law enforcement facility and trying to go to work for another one that has a record. I think it's important that the de-escalation training is important because that's something I see in my work. And then also it changed the tow code to deadly force, which I think was important. I think the most wonderful thing for me as a new representative this year is when Representative Sturwell, when that bill passed the House, he had tears in his eyes, walked across the aisle and hugged Robin Shackelford, who is the leader of the Black Caucus. And to see that togetherness and that work happen at a state level was just wonderful for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Well, you mentioned the Black Caucus. I'm sure you know, toward the end of February, there was a day in which some of the members of the Black Caucus were booed while raising concerns about a bill that they believed was discriminatory. How do you feel about the leadership's response to that incident?
I can't speak to how the leadership responded to actually. Our speaker accepted full responsibility for that and tried to make changes moving forward, but I really can't speak to the members who booed or did that. 90% of our legislation up here passes bipartisan, and we have really good people up here. I think the hardest part for me about having the term politician attached to my name is that there seems to be this negative connotation with it, and I have just seen so many good people up here doing so many good things. I'm really proud be part of this state.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's move on to a bill that's gotten a little bit of attention, essentially putting dogs in ambulances, I guess you'd say. It's House Bill 1201. It allows the emergency transportation of an injured operational canine in an ambulance. Can you tell us a little more about that bill and why it's being brought up? I assume you support it?
Yes, I do support it. Only if a human is not present and doesn't need that ambulance service can that pet be transported. But we all have a special place in our heart for our pets, those pet lovers of us. And when you have a canine who's working on a job and they get injured and they need help, if that availability is there to help them, why not help?
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well, let's move on to House Resolution number 4. It also has a lot of support in the General Assembly and recognizes January 11th as Human Trafficking Awareness Day. As I understand it, this is important to you, right?
It is important to me. We, in our country, we seem to focus so much on what has occurred in the past, and we have such a huge issue right now. And those children that come across our border, many times, the reason they were separated from their parents is because we didn't actually know that they were their parents because, we were finding them out in the population in human trafficking, and we needed to try to verify that. So it is very, very important to me because it's so dangerous for those children at the border who are trying to come over here to seek a better life. They get in the wrong hands with the wrong adult, and it could be a horrendous outcome.
Yes. All right, well, we have just a couple of moments left. Perhaps there are some other measures, anything else you'd like to discuss that we haven't brought up here?
Well, my favorite thing I've done this year has been House Bill 1009. It's the address the TANF cliff effect. It helps when somebody in a family who gets TANF benefits or welfare benefits, if they are in school enrolled in an apprenticeship program or a college program trying to better themselves, if they are making a little more money, it won't negatively affect their benefits. I am a casualty of generational poverty, and I use things like food stamps and a Pell Grant and things. Government services helped me to get where I am today. And I actually faced that cliff effect when I was in nursing school years ago. I got a raise, and it actually paid me more in benefits if I didn't work one day a week after I got that raise. So I had to back away from my work schedule to be able to feed my family. And House Bill 1009 is going to help try to avoid that cliff effect of pushing people off that cliff. And especially with the minimum wage increase right now, some employers are just, involuntarily increasing their wages. And that's going to cause a problem with the cliff effect. So we need to make them some steps to not only help those in poverty in Indiana, but it will boost our workforce because these people won't be involved in the workforce training initiatives.
You mentioned the minimum wage. Do you think Indiana should boost the state's minimum wage? It's been at $7.25 now since 2009, I believe.
It's been a long time, but there's, like I said, there's so many different issues involved in that. And I don't know enough about what's going on in our TANF benefits and our welfare system and with our benefits right now to say if I really think that increasing the minimum wage would hurt those families or if it would help those families. Because ultimately, when you increase the minimum wage, not only you might push some of these people off the cliff, but you're also going to see an increase in prices, and those people aren't going to be able to afford services, basic services. So I need to get a little better knowledge about that before I can answer your question.
All right. Well, I believe we will have to leave it there. State Representative Cindy Ledbetter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Next week, our scheduled guest is Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara. I'm John Gibson with WNIN FM. Thanks for joining us for WNIN Lawmakers.